Listen, Katt Williams has the internet on fire. You know, I saw yesterday when Shannon Sharpe posted just a photo of he and Katt, and he said, "We're going to break the internet tomorrow." He said it. And listen, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Katt Williams had a lot to say and lit the entire industry. He lit him up. And he came with some receipts. And of course, I went to look at some of the receipts to make sure the receipts were receipting. And we're going to get into all of that. Listen, Katt Williams, he dropped an interview with Shannon Sharpe on Club Shay Shay that, as I mentioned, has had everybody talking all day. It's, I think, 2 hours and 45 minutes long. So almost 3 hours. And he had a lot to say and some receipts. And of course, you know, the internet, they're going to do their job. They're going to do their due diligence. And if you mention something, somebody is going to take it upon themselves. Like, well, let's see. Let's go see if we can dig up the receipts for all of this information that you are providing. Now, I will say, one, I really enjoy Katt Williams and always have. Does he do some outlandish things sometimes? Sure. But don't most comedians? Isn't that why we're attracted to them? I I don't do you rank him? Is he someone that you put in your top 5? Is he someone that you forget about? Is he someone that you even think belongs? I think that there's credence to some of what he says about his work independently, but well, let's just see. The first clip that we're going to get into is Ricky Smiley was a guest on Club Shay Shay, and he shared a story about the fact that he originally auditioned for the role of Money Mike in, is it Friday After Next? Yeah, it's Friday After Next. And he said something happened and they ended up switching the roles and he was Santa Claus. Katt Williams says, nope, that is not exactly how that went down. And he then went on to explain not only his version of events, but also to say that he had it put in his contract for the next film that he did, that Ricky Smiley also did, that stated Ricky Smiley would have to be in a dress to be in that movie. Now, the side note to that is we know that one of Ricky Smiley's largest characters, most popular characters, was a church lady. I don't remember what her name was, but you know, it was around there. So we'll get into that on the other side. Let's hear the first of Katt's haymakers.
He told you the story about when the movie came out. Where did he say he watched it? At home. He wasn't even at the premiere. You telling this man, you stole that. Oh, so he could get his name in the same sentence with a great one. It is sad. He was just that bitter when we were shooting it. He told everybody, it should have been my role. Everybody on the scene. Why do you think no cast member has ever said anything?
He couldn't have played that role like you. I thought he was...
Sir, no one... Why no... He was with KD? He beat up Terry Crews? Why nobody know this story? You talking about in Hollywood, they switched off roles. You take this and he... What?
So
Ricky Smiley knows this. And I don't know why he would lose a child and come on the air and start lying. That's why people believe in rituals right there. It's because, well, why would he lie? I don't know why liars lie. But I can tell you this. We auditioned in Los Angeles.
So, essentially, Katt is saying that everybody, and we're going to hear some other clips, has borrowed or been creative or wanted to be associated to some degree in his name, right? With his name. Is it possible? It definitely is, because we know that in any space, right? But especially something that involves situations where some people think there can only be one. sometimes it can be a little tricky and it can be definitely be competitive, right? So, I don't know if he had an I don't believe he had an example about he and Ricky. Well, what he said was essentially, how could Ricky Smiley have been Money Mike when he wrote a lot of the dialogue for it? That they allowed him to make changes to the character because he was so tapped in, even though it was his first film. He shared a story that in the original script, Money Mike was supposed to be assaulted more than he was in the film by Terry Cruz's character. I think, was it Damon? Is that what his name was when he just got out of jail? I can't remember. The landlord's son. You remember the whole storyline with Money Mike and the son. Katt said that he told the producers and writers, Cube included, that rape is never funny, no matter who the victim was, and that there are better ways that you can express comedy, you can express funny things and not utilizing rape. Because if you want this film to be a classic, it can't be a classic comedy, he said, with that type of scene in there. And I think that, and this is something else that he shared, he also said that he felt as though, people speak a lot about comedy in the current sense and what can't go in current times. And he basically said that's fine. You just have to adapt. As language changes, as it always does, slang, what's appropriate, you move and change with it. Because if you're funny and you have a depth as far as dialogue, language, etc., etc. His beef with Cedric the Entertainer is one that he's been talking about for years. It stems from the Kings of Comedy and Cedric's joke to end that set. If you remember, Cedric told the joke about being a black man in a space shuttle and how we would whip it and how the music up and da 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 da. Well, on Comic View, Katt told a joke that was similar in nature. But here's the thing. Do I feel Cedric may have borrowed some of that joke? I do. But so Katt's joke was similarly about a black man in a car, but he was talking about when your car breaks down when you're in the hood and how you got to get out and push. But there was it was a lot of physical comedy, which is why I'm not playing both clips for you here now, because a lot of it is what you need to see with the visuals and not so much just the dialogue, although that plays a role in it. It definitely seemed inspired by, but said kind of perfected it. But that doesn't make it okay. That's just my opinion. Cedric did respond, but before we get into what Cedric's response was, let's hear a little bit of the street sweeping, as Thomas Outlaw called it, that Katt did of not just Cedric. He had a little bit for Steve as well. Earthquake inadvertently got some, couple others. So let's hear.
What is your relationship with Steve Harvey, Ricky Smiley, and Cedric the Entertainer as you sit here currently?
For 30 years, they're a group. These aren't three random guys. The way that Ricky Smiley kept appearing at all of my auditions is because of Steven said he would tell anybody that, listen, they got a gang on that side. They know what it is. They know who the gang is. Why Earthquake not in movies? 'Cause he's illiterate. He can't read. And they found that out when they gave him a show and put the cards in front of him. Like, all of these dudes are co-entwined and they share secrets. And this is the age of truth. And the truth doesn't need to be scared of the fact that people tell lies. Cats on drugs. Where are the stories? Why is there no story of anybody who ever sold a drug to me, did a drug with me, was around me when I was inebriated? I got $5.
So we're not going to touch the other part, but I don't know. If you feel like you've been in a position where, comedy is a close knit group, right? There is a circuit, much like, any other thing of that nature, where there are few people that you see over and over again, right? With Steve, he just feels like Steve maybe isn't as talented as he believes himself to be. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. You can't really, if that's what he feels, that's what he feels. But he did mention a beef that Mark Curry, who's a comedian, I don't know if you remember the show Hanging with Mr. Cooper. They used to come on back in the 90s, and I think actually Mark Curry used to be one of the no, Sinbad was a host at Showtime at the Apollo. I think Mark Curry was a host for Showtime at the Apollo at one point as well. And Mark Curry had a beef with Steve because he said that Steve took one of his entire jokes and used it in his comedy routine. Well, the internet went and found receipts. Mark Curry actually talked about this on a Fox Soul show called Mike and Donnie. And what he said was there was a joke he did about, he said it was about his real life, his actual life, what really happened to him when he was a kid, that his mom, I think his mom had 6 kids, 8 kids. He had a number of siblings, and that they were poor. And so one of his Halloween costumes, he said it would be a box. And people would ask what he was. He'd be like, I don't know. She didn't tell us. I guess I'm UPS or something like that, right? So this was in 1999. There's video footage of it. In 2015, on the Steve Harvey show, it was Halloween, and Steve told the exact same joke, except instead of his mom, he said it was his dad and the box and the UPS thing. So, you know, much like with hip hop, comedy is something where people have writers. Sometimes they write jokes for them, they pitch jokes. A lot of that happens. There's stories all the time about people writing for people, waiting for their break, especially for women comedians. Sometimes they would finally get the opportunity to write for someone or write with them, but wouldn't necessarily get that break for themselves. One of the things that's been said is that Katt Williams is a male comedian who put a lot of female comedians on, that he shared his space and his time. They also discussed, and you saw it across social media, some comedians saying, hey, I did a show with Katt Williams. We weren't supposed to be paid. Katt slid me $700. That was the most I ever made for a comedy tour or whatever. So one of the things that we can say about Katt is that whatever you think about him, he seems to be very honest and consistent, right? I will say though, and I saw someone that mentioned this on Twitter, like he'll tell a story and it'll be all the way true, and then for some reason it'll veer off into some fantastical lie or story. I wonder if that's just a comedian thing in the storytelling thing, because some of those things, like he was saying that in the interview, and I haven't finished watching all of it, but that by 7 he was reading 3,000 books a year, and that he can run a 4-4, and he would have had a football scholarship or something in sports if he had stayed in school and been able to. And I don't know about that. That might be just a slight exaggeration, but I do think that he also said that there are cliques that happen within comedy, and that all of the same people tend to work with each other, which we know that to be the case in a lot of situations and industries. Why? Because people want to work with their friends. So he's not necessarily wrong with that.